Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you the basics of our Philips Epiq CVX machine that we have here at the school. And we are going to be entering patient information, going over some of our basic physics settings and imaging settings, also how to freeze images, capture images and clips, and use some of the features that this machine has to offer. I do want to disclose that this machine does have 3D capabilities, but we will not be utilizing those in today's video. And we of course will not be utilizing contrast, strain imaging at this time, or any of the extra tools available. So this is just a basic introduction video to show you some of the basics of this machine. I'm personally a big fan of this machine. I worked on this machine for a few years before I became an instructor, so I'm happy to have it here to show my students. So first thing we're going to do is whenever we power on the machine, the power button is right here, and we're going to power on the machine all the way, let it take its time to boot up, and then we are going to first enter our patient's information. So to enter our patient information, we're going to look at the top toolbar on the touch screen, all the way to the left where it says patient with the little person. We're going to click that and it's going to bring up a demographics page. So for the demonstration purposes, I'll tell you what I'm filling in, but of course you would put the appropriate information for what you need. So I'm gonna put our last name as Test, our first name as Test, our patient ID, I'm gonna put in a bunch of random numbers. And then for purposes, if you need to do any sort of index volumes or equations, which you will need to do as a student, you would put in your patient's height and weight here. So I'm just gonna put 5'7" and I'm gonna put that they are 150 pounds. And then you can also select adult echo under study type, and you can put in a blood pressure if that's appropriate for the patient as well. If you're just practicing, height and weight should be just fine. So after you enter the patient's information, you can either go down to proceed to protocol or hit the 2D button. I'm gonna hit the 2D button, and you're gonna notice that on the top left of your screen, but still in the middle, you'll see your patient's first and last name as well as their ID number. So now that patient information is entered, we are able to capture clips and save images as needed. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the different settings. So I like for this machine to be set on prospective, meaning that it captures 3 beats after you press the acquire button. Some students and some professionals prefer retrospective, where it goes back in time 3 beats and collects that information. It's really tomato situation. It's whatever people prefer. It's strictly preference. I prefer for my students to learn both ways, and since our GEs are set on retrospective, I prefer these to be set on prospective. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer here, specifically to the touch screen, so that you can see what I'm talking about. So on the screen here, this is our capture type. It is on prospective. If someone wishes to have it on retro, you just click it, and from there forward, it would be retro. So I'm going to keep that on prospective. Some additional information that we can note about this touchscreen is we have our, just going from top to bottom, we have review, where you would review all of your images. You have the report, which is where all the analysis and information goes. You have keyboard to bring up your keyboard to annotate on the screen. And you have max view, which is going to increase the size of the display of your active scan so that you can see it larger if you would like. I personally do not like to scan in max view, however, many people do. All the way to the right, we have our end exam. Of course, that's to archive the images and to actually save the exam to move on to the next patient or for the next student. So next, we have our options here for some of our 2D imaging. So we have our Chroma map, which gives us the option to change or colorize our image accordingly. For my students, we're going to start using this around week 5 or 6, I believe, whenever we start actually measuring Simpson's biplane. So this is our Chroma map, and you can select any of these that you'd like, but for now we will keep it off. Harmonic imaging is automatically turned on to help improve our 2D image. I don't personally use Image Boost, and for freshmen, we will not be using iRotate. It is a helpful tool for the real world though, where when you get an apical 4, for example, you can automatically use the settings in the machine to get a 2, 3, or so on and so forth. Additionally, we will not be utilizing contrast, but there is a contrast button here standard to the machine if you're using Definity or Optosign during a study. We have our EKG lead, so I do prefer it be set on lead 2 since that is our main reading lead. However, if for some reason your lead is giving you trouble, maybe they're not sticking properly, first and foremost, of course, I always want you to adjust the leads, maybe change the sticker out, but if you need to in the middle of a scan, you can change this to some additional leads, such as 1 and 3, but I do prefer it to be set on 2. Whenever we do our party in the heart, as we call it, which is our tissue Doppler imaging, the tissue Doppler button is here on the screen. You would press it to activate it, and then it changes us into our tissue Doppler settings. Anytime we're in a Doppler or in a measurement package or anything, to go back, all you hit is the 2D button here. So for example, if I hit tissue Doppler and I wish to go back to my 2D imaging, I would hit 2D and it'll go back to that main screen. Off to the right here, we have our loop type, which we prefer it to be set on beats. And we also prefer our loop length, which is right below it, to be set to at least 3 or 4 beats. I prefer 3 beats and the loop type to be on beats. All that's saying is that you do need your EKG hooked up, and it's acquiring based on how many heartbeats or cycles it sees or reads from the EKG. And then to the right here, we will not utilize any of these settings for my beginner students, but these are settings that the machine has for 3D options. Maybe in the future, I can make a video about some of those features as well. Additionally, down at the bottom here, we have some different settings that can help improve the quality of our images. The first one is our 2-dimensional option setting. I personally prefer this set on H-pin for penetration most of the time, especially for difficult patients. However, you can change it to gen or res, and those are different physics options to allow for different amounts of penetration, and it adjusts a variety of settings to allow for clearer images, higher frame rate, so on and so forth. We also have some additional options here. We have our M mode button, which is right in the middle. You can either touch the screen or you can utilize the button right below it. And of course, always hit 2D to go back to your main screen. Our loop length, again, that's how many cardiac cycles it's recording. Our sector width, which is very important. We constantly increase and decrease the sector width to provide more focus on what we're looking at. And it also improves our frame rate when we decrease our sector. And then iRotate is another 3D option that we will not be utilizing in this class. So that's a basis of how to enter a patient. That is our main settings on the screen here. Now, if you scroll over to the right, there are some additional settings as well that you can mess with. I always tell students whenever you're first starting out, as long as you're using the machine in good faith, there is nothing that you can touch settings-wise that I cannot fix. So please familiarize yourself with the physics and ask me questions about how these different features work. Additionally, to move on to the keyboard here, I'm gonna put the camera down. We have some different settings necessary for performing an echocardiogram. So we have our TGCs off to the side here. Now this is your time gain compensation. So moving them to the right will increase the amount of gain in that related field, all the way from near field to far field. So usually you want them in a uniform position, either staggered left to right, right to left, or pretty much vertical. We have these top knobs here, which are appropriate for the knobs or the settings on the touch screen at the bottom. So for example, if we activate this button here, it would be our M mode feature. And whenever you're actively in a mode, such as M mode or color Doppler or spectral Doppler, if you turn that knob clockwise, it will increase the gain of that setting. If you turn it counterclockwise, it will decrease the gain of that setting. So again, that works for your spectral Dopplers, color Doppler, 2D, and also M mode. So press 2D to go back. And then here we have our continuous wave Doppler, our pulse wave Doppler, our 2D button, color Doppler, and a 3D button that we won't be messing with this quarter. Additionally on here, we have our zoom, we have depth, we have a focus button off to the side here. To move it down, you would rotate it clockwise. To move it up, counterclockwise. Again, I do expect my students to use these buttons appropriately to best optimize their images, as well as to keep our frame rate as high as possible. Additionally, we have our measure button, a label button here, erase, our cursor button or pointer. We have 3 main buttons here in the middle, as well as our trackball. And then we have eye scan, which is an AI feature that the machine has to better your image in some circumstances. So I always suggest that students practice clicking eye scan, and it works for both 2-dimensional imaging as well as Doppler parameters. So I always suggest clicking it one time and giving it a second to work. See how the image looks before altering it. But remember, ultimately the sonographer is responsible for the settings of the machine. Eye scan can help, but it does not fix things magically. Then we have our acquire button here, which has a tactile button on it so you can feel without looking. This is the button that we will actually use to acquire most of our images. It says acquire 1. So whenever we want to acquire a clip, we would press it 1 time. You'll notice a magnifying glass spinning at the bottom here, and you will hear a beep. Once the machine beeps, it will replay the image, the cine clip for you, so that you can either accept or reject the loop. If I hit reject, the image will not be stored, or the clip will not be stored. If I hit accept, the image will be stored in the right-hand corner there and will add to my total images. If I accidentally store an image or later want to delete an image, I would go to review, and then I would come over here, hover over, and hit erase. Now, whenever you hit erase, it's going to put a red X over the image, and that means that that image will not be saved whenever we end the exam. So then I'll hit 2D to come out of that. And then lastly, for image acquisition, we have the freeze button here. This is for you to freeze a still image, and you can scroll to the appropriate part of your cardiac cycle if necessary to obtain a measurement. Once you obtain the measurement, you would hit acquire, and it would save the image for you. Now, that being said, let's move on to our measurements. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer here. All right, so this is the measurement package and how we have it set up on the machine here. So whenever I freeze an image, let me go live, I'm gonna freeze an image. The measurement package is likely to pop up automatically. If it does not, you can hit this measure button here. Once you have the measurements pulled up, you can perform any appropriate measurement. Keep in mind that the machine has an idea of what measurements can be performed in what mode. That being said, right now it's showing me my 2-dimensional frozen measurements. So all measurements appropriate for my image being a frozen 2D image. If I come out of this and I hit, for example, continuous wave, and I freeze, the measurements that it's going to show me are going to be measurements appropriate for continuous wave Doppler. And that also works, again, if I come out and I hit pulse wave and freeze, it will show me measurements appropriate for pulse wave. So as a student and as a new sonographer, you use your best judgment to understand that labels can have different names from machine to machine, and it's our responsibility to learn that language and to learn the synonyms so that we can measure appropriately for what we're doing. If for some reason the measurement package does not have a specific measurement titled or labeled necessary at the time, you can utilize these here as a generic way of measuring, also known as just a caliper measurement. Now, when it comes to measuring, I do want to mention that, for example, let's say that I am measuring my LVOT tracing here. So I'll come up. Now I'm just going to do a random tracing on this machine. Whenever I'm ready to set this measurement in place, it's important that I hit this top button here so that I can move on to my next measurement. And you can see that it's no longer orange, it's white. And if not, then I can also just save the image and it would set it automatically on this machine. That does not work on the GE machines. If for some reason you do not actually set your point on the GE machine, it will not save the measurement properly, and that will cause inaccurate results and discrepancies with our reporting. So I hope you guys enjoyed this basic rundown of the Philips Epiq CVX. Of course, now we can end our exam, and it takes us out to the main screen again so that we can do our next patient. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, of course, ask, and I will see you guys in the next video where we will be going over one of our other machines. Bye, guys.